Hello and welcome to the latest episode of Truss Issues, the podcast where we dissect Liz Truss's first 100 days in office and discuss general UK politics at the same time. Today I'm joined just by Ben. Hello, Ben.
Hello.
Nelson is ill and Zach isn't in the country. So it's just us. And for video viewers, we're sat in the office today, not in the studio. Very cozy. If you're just listening, put on your hottest jumper because it's cozy. We're just sat on the sofa,
Just chatting politics.
Just chatting.
Yeah.
This is because the studio is being upgraded at the moment. We're making some changes to make live streams better and make sure
notably having Windows as the operating system.
I mean, we are upgrading to a PC from a Mac, but that's not a political decision. That is pure. I don't know what it is. I don't want to say it's better in any way. Anyway, so what has Liz Truss been up to this week, and what are the plans for the weekend?
Well, as we said last time, we're still in the mourning period. So this week's been another very strange week in politics. You know, we've been, right next to the office even. There's been the queues to go and see the Queen lying in state. Politics has sort of been suspended for this week, as we said. So there's been no government announcements. There's, the Parliament hasn't been sitting, so we haven't seen any laws, anything going through Parliament, no debates, nothing like that. So all of the work that Liz Truss has been doing has largely been behind the scenes.
Yeah.
So up until now, we haven't really seen her. She's been seen at a couple of official engagements.
Yeah, she's been pretty busy going around and doing things. I've seen some criticism of that, in fact, that this is a kind of golden opportunity for her to do a bunch of stuff behind the scenes, and she could be really hunkering down and doing that. But instead, she's going around on these events, which makes sense. It's like a momentous moment. And you kind of got to hope that she's only the Prime Minister. The ministers and everyone else isn't going. So you've got to think, as you say, behind the scenes there's stuff happening.
Well, I have seen some indications that there are quite a lot of plans for next week, which I'm sure we'll get into. The government is still working behind the scenes. It's not that they're not doing anything. Yeah. It's just in the official mourning period, they're trying not to conduct politics in view of the public, while there's all the mourning and there's the grief of losing the monarch. So that's what's been happening this week. Nothing very public.
But we're heading into a very public weekend, not for politics necessarily, but a big weekend.
So this weekend we're expecting basically a lot of foreign dignitaries to be in the UK. Yeah. All coming to get ready for Monday, which is the state funeral, and to be in attendance for that. There's been a lot of controversy this week, and there's been things in the news about how they're going to get there, and there's this whole bus saga.
Yes, the bus situation.
But, it's sort of a side note.
How many world leaders can you fit in a bus?
Well, this is the thing. I mean, it's an interesting thing to talk about. I don't understand why the papers are running with this, but at the end of the day, it's not that,
Sure.
The transport
Biden's been on a bus before. Well, Biden's not even going in the bus. Macron's been on a bus.
Yeah. But Biden is going to be going in the
Which world
beast.
leader do you think hasn't been on a bus? There's got to be one.
It's a great question, and by which I mean it's a trash question.
It's a good question.
I don't know. Which
I reckon
Mohammed
bin Salman.
There's no way Trump's ever been on a bus, but he's not a.
No, that's a good one.
Yeah.
Or maybe he has though. Maybe while doing tours of his golf course or whatever, they go on a tour bus kind of
I
thing.
presume you mean they've bought a bus ticket and got on a bus.
Yeah, true.
Not a coach.
Mohammed bin Salman hasn't been on a bus.
Not a chance.
I
mean, we should
go
say
on,
we
in
are
the comments.
speculating.
I want your best guesses for current world leaders who've never been on a bus. This is important.
This is such a side note.
Anyway,
I feel like I started this by saying that this is not an important political thing.
there's no significance to the buses, but there is significance to the world leaders who are being invited.
Yeah, so obviously the actual transport arrangements of the foreign dignitaries isn't that important. I can understand why the papers ran with it. It's a mildly sort of trivial thing that we can talk about. But it is actually quite notable that we're having so many important foreign leaders in one place. Now, what's important to note is this isn't a formal occasion. This isn't something where they're going to be having what are referred to as bilaterals between leaders. That's not happening this weekend. But there are going to be some informal meetings.
They're going to see each other.
They are going to see each other. So the actual state funeral is on Monday. So they're expected to fly in this weekend on the bus.
They're going to have a chat on the bus. Do you reckon they'll group them together a bit like a wedding? There's going to be a Europe bus, Middle East bus, or maybe they'll say
on the Europe bus they're playing Venga Boys. Are we playing
mix them up. Say, I don't reckon Macron's spoken to what's he called?
This is a really hard line to go switching between joking about the bus and going into important foreign policy decisions.
The bus is what people want. The bus.
People want the bus.
That's the title of this episode. People want the bus.
Well, irrespective of whether people want the bus, there are going to be some important meetings this weekend.
Who do you want to be on the bus with? If you could be on the bus with 5 world leaders, sorry, no.
This is going to be in the comments. So we've got a lot of foreign dignitaries coming in. There's no bilaterals. It's important to note, but there are going to be
bus
meetings.
Stop chatter.
Bus stop chatter. I feel like I can't get through this point.
Sorry,
this is making it very difficult. But this is important because Truss has actually, in the last few weeks, in the run-up to her becoming Prime Minister, she has, ruffled some feathers internationally. So obviously there was the whole Macron saga, which was her saying that she's not sure if he's a friend or a foe to the UK.
Yeah.
She also the Russians were so annoyed with her that they put their nuclear arsenals on red alert.
Forgot about that. Was her fault, wasn't it? Ages
that was
ago.
Because of Truss as foreign secretary. So before she even became prime minister, there's been some issues with her and other countries. So I would presume that she's going to try and use this weekend in an informal manner to try and at least mend or get off on the right foot with some world leaders.
Sure.
I'd imagine Macron is probably going to be one of them, because Macron has actually, in the last few days, been quite sympathetic to the UK. He said some stuff.
His speech was a very good one.
Yeah,
notable.
Exactly. So I feel like that sort of comes to heads with...
Yeah.
It
does.
Liz Truss's...
and the question is, does this kind of event and the monarchy and all that supersede the political tension?
Of course.
And also, how real is the political tension? Like Liz Truss saying that with kind of Julia Hartley-Brewer in front of a bunch of braying Tory voters, like... How much did she mean that, and how much was it just...
Well, it's the classic sort of campaign trail versus prime minister. You do have to sort of rise above it when you become the prime minister.
Yeah.
Because, what is more important than riling up your base is the function of your country and international diplomacy. So I would imagine that she's going to try and use this weekend in an informal manner to try and maybe not mend, but certainly get off on the right foot with a number of world leaders.
Yeah.
So that's all then coming to a head on Monday, which is the state funeral.
Sure.
Which obviously, we've covered this in videos and everything else. This is going to be quite a large moment. There's been a lot of closures. Basically, the country is closed on Monday. Everything from supermarkets, GP appointments, things like that, all stopping on Monday for the state funeral. It's going to be a national moment, and there's not going to be anything, I would imagine, anything political. Everything is so important to keep politics from that on Monday.
Yeah.
So Monday, but that will be, I would presume, the last day, and then we get on with politics as usual.
Wild. Okay, so heading into next week, I mean, obviously this weekend, as you say, this week, behind the scenes stuff has been going on.
Yes.
We don't really know what. Ministers have probably been doing stuff, getting to know their, the civil service departments, the important people. It is actually quite a good opportunity for them to, I mean, obviously we're in the middle of a crisis still, but it's a slightly less public environment to do that in. So they've been doing that this week, likely. Truss has been going around the country, events and stuff as well. This weekend she'll be meeting with foreign leaders, notably Macron. Anyone else particularly worth calling out?
Well, no. I mean, it's not actually known who she's going to be meeting with.
Sure.
So this is.
But is there anyone else that's coming that she might want to?
I would imagine
with?
the US president.
Of course.
Special relationship is very important, and I'd imagine, especially conservatives are quite strong on the special relationship. So I'd imagine she'd be very keen to meet Biden and to try and establish that as a good relationship.
So she'll be doing that this weekend.
Yes.
Hanging around bus stops, ruffling some tickets.
Yes.
And then we head into next week.
We do.
So next week, Parliament re-adjourns?
Yes.
That's
correct.
That's correct.
Yeah.
And there's a few things we know are coming. So we know there's corporation tax changes potentially.
Yes.
Bankers' bonuses, the NHS. What order are we going to go through those in?
You pick.
Let's start with the NHS. Let's start with the end.
So on Thursday, it's expected that the new Health Secretary, Theresa Coffey, who's also incidentally the Deputy Prime Minister, is going to be making a speech about the NHS and the state of the NHS.
Yeah.
Now, we did actually release a video on this on the UK channel recently. The NHS is in quite a difficult position at the minute.
Yeah.
NHS waiting times are an all-time high. We've had... There's some knock-on effects from the pandemic. Obviously, the waiting lists are a knock-on effect from the pandemic.
Yeah.
We've also, just as a small side note, things like the amount that people drink alcohol, the alcohol habits have increased in lockdown. So problem drinkers are drinking more, which are causing them more harm, and that's expected to mean that they will be admitted to hospital more frequently. There'll be more of them, which is going to cost the NHS a lot more in the next few years. And there's a number of knock-on effects like that from the pandemic. These are issues that are really going to need to be tackled by the government soon. So I'd imagine that she's going to sort of outline that and potentially some way of fixing this. I would imagine some policy for this. We don't know exactly what she's going to say on Thursday. This is all speculation, but the NHS is in a hard state at the minute. Because of the knock-on effects of the pandemic. It was already waiting times were very long before the pandemic, and they're massive now. So I'd imagine that's what she's going to be announcing on Thursday.
And then let's move to kind of corporation tax.
Yeah, corporation tax. So Liz Truss, before becoming Prime Minister, pitched herself very much as the Prime Minister who's going to try and reduce taxes. Low tax Prime Minister, getting back to core Conservative values. He's going to try and be a sort of Thatcherite Prime Minister. She made very clear that she wanted to do this early on in her premiership. Obviously, with the mourning period, she hasn't been able to do it that quickly. So she's keen to hit the ground running next week. Not hit the ground, as she said in the in the campaign. So one of the things that she wants to do, Boris Johnson had announced an increase when he was Prime Minister of corporation tax from 19 to 25%. Liz Truss is going to try and stop that from happening. She's going to probably announce on Friday in an emergency budget that she's going to cancel that and keep corporation tax at 19%.
Which is low. For context, 19% on a global basis, on a G7 basis, on an EU basis, however you want to look at it, 19%. It means obviously there's tax havens and stuff where it's basically zero, but 19% is still very low for an economy like ours.
I think it's also worth noting that this actually demonstrates the divergence between the political parties at the minute. Boris Johnson was quite a bombastic figure, but didn't really have a really strong, Johnsonian ideology. Like that's not something he really had. And the fact that he was sort of, increasing corporation tax as a Conservative Prime Minister, indicates that maybe in certain ways, and especially with his environmental policies as well, that there were some similarities between him and maybe some left-wing figures. Liz Truss is
less
a break from that. She is going back. She's really trying to harken back to the sort of Margaret Thatcher ideology of low tax, increased growth. Thatcher in her first years famously reduced income tax, especially from high earners as well, in her first few years in office. And I imagine that's what Liz Truss is trying to harken back to. If you look at her in the campaign, and the fact that she even tried to dress as Thatcher in a number of occasions and tried to portray herself in photos as Thatcher, I think that this reduction of corporation tax is a deliberate, way to try and signal to her base that she is going to be more Thatcherite.
And then finally, we've got another kind of more right-wing economic move on bankers' bonuses.
Yeah, bankers' bonuses is a big one. So this is Kwasi Kwarteng, the Chancellor. It's been indicated today that he wants to try and... So just for some context, after the 2008 financial crash, the EU tried to impose a limit on how much bankers could be paid as their bonuses. So the limit is 100% of their income. So they can have 100% as a banker's bonus. That can rise to 200% with shareholder approval. It's been indicated today that Kwasi Kwarteng might want to either scrap that or increase that limit. Again, this is going to be hugely politically controversial because at the minute, as we've mentioned a number of times, we're living through a cost of living crisis, inflation crisis, energy crisis. Families are really struggling. And to hear that bankers, their bonuses can go up, even
from
further.
What could be 200% already. From that's millions.
So this is the thing.
It
if you're
already
earning
was high.
50k, you could get up to 150k.
And these bankers aren't a lot of them. They're earning a lot more than that. So you're talking a ton of money.
And the fact that's been floated, this is the other thing, is that we haven't heard much in the way of policy so far. And yes, this is because of the mourning period, but even in the campaign trail, quite honestly, there wasn't too much detail. And for this to be one of the details that they're pushing quite early on.
It's a weird one.
Firstly, it indicates just how right-wing they're going to be. And it also indicates their priorities. And the fact that their priorities are corporation tax and bankers' bonuses.
Very focused on business.
Very, very, quite difficult. And this gets back to the point that I made earlier this week, which is that by 2024, Liz Truss really needs to be pitching herself to the broader electorate if she wants to win this next election. She's pitched herself very successfully to the right of the Conservative Party, but that doesn't win elections. Pitching to your base does not win elections, and largely that's been Labour's problem for the last 20 years. Well, not with under Blair and Brandt, maybe 10 years then. That they've been pitching very much to their own base. The Conservatives have been quite good at pitching more generally. Johnson with his green agenda as well. Cameron quite soft on social issues. So, pitching that. Liz Truss seems to be a break from that and seems to be quite ideological and pitching to the right. And this is a real good indication of this. And this is why I said earlier this week that I think she's going to struggle in 2024, because all indications so far point to the fact that she's not willing to break out of this ideology and that she's not willing to approach the rest of the electorate.
And even when it comes to Conservative base, she still didn't get a majority of Conservative voters, let alone breaking further. And as you say, this is a fairly controversial issue. Corporation tax, probably less controversial. But as you say, in a time of cost of living, people probably aren't overly keen to see corporation tax dropped or maintained at the lower level. Either way, I think both of them reflect what her attitude is towards the economy, and she probably genuinely thinks both are good moves and they'll boost GDP and it will all pay for itself and whatever. But the pure optics of it, even beyond whether she thinks it will work more medium term, right now it's not going to be an easy sell. And you're right, it's going to be difficult 2024 and onwards.
Yeah, exactly. And this is the thing that we were saying earlier this week as well, is that her cabinet as well is very right-wing. So she's not going to have many dissenters in there. And that's, again, another really bold move from her, because we've still got a large part of the Conservative Party that the MPs, she wasn't their choice as the next Prime Minister and their leader. So she's having to try and win those over, but she's not trying to. She hasn't put anybody else really except her backers in her cabinet. And that makes things really difficult. Plus, we've got Johnson, who's still in Parliament and commands a backing. So it seems like she's really not trying to play the game very much. She's just appointing her backers. So she's not pitching to the rest of her party. She's not pitching to the rest of the electorate, which means she could have a very rough ride in Parliament, which we haven't seen yet. She hasn't really been in Parliament yet. So there could be some difficult relationships with her backbenchers and also with the wider electorate.
We'll have to see. Big week ahead, big weekend ahead.
Exactly.
Who's going to be on which buses? We'll be keeping a close eye on that. Join us again next week. In theory, next Tuesday. But obviously, it's a bank holiday here in the UK on Monday, so it may end up being Wednesday. Apologies if it is. But we'll be back beginning half of next week to run through what happens at the beginning of the week with the Queen's state funeral and also the first day back in Parliament. So we'll rejoin you then. Have a nice weekend. See you then.
See you later.